The wind carried a strange silence that morning. Not the kind that settles after prayer or sleep, but the kind that warns. Emily Thatcher paused mid-sentence, her chalk still on the blackboard, as the hush settled over the schoolhouse. Behind her, the students shifted in their benches. A bird that had been chirping outside fell quiet. She blinked at the stillness, then slowly turned toward the door. Dust rose just past the edge of the windows. Not wind. Hooves. She stepped out, her boots crunching dry dirt, eyes narrowing against the glare. Riders, Apache, a dozen of them, closing in fast but silent. No war cries, no warning shots. Just the rhythm of hooves and eyes like stone. She didn't scream. She didn't run. She raised one hand slowly, like she might calm a spooked horse, and whispered, "Back inside. Lock the door." The children didn't question. Doors closed. The thud of the lock slid into place behind her. But she didn't move from the porch. The leader dismounted, tall, broad-shouldered, and scar-marked. He looked past her, at the building. Then, with a single nod, two of his men moved forward. "No one here hurt a soul," she said, voice steady. "They're just children." The leader didn't answer. His eyes drifted to the silver chain around her neck, then to the blue ribbon pinned at her collar. Something in him tightened. Not rage, memory. They took her swiftly, without striking. No blood. No burning. Just a cloth around her eyes and the sharp tug of ropes at her wrists. She didn't struggle. Her boots scraped the dirt as they pulled her onto a horse, the silence between them thick as wool. She thought of her brother then. Thomas. The Union jacket he wore, the way he'd kiss her forehead before leaving to patrol the San Pedro crossings. She thought of how he wrote letters in careful script, always ending with, "Keep teaching them. That's the real fight." She wondered if he'd hear about this. If anyone would. The ride was long. They didn't speak. When they finally stopped, hands lifted her down roughly but not cruelly. She could smell smoke, cedar, leather. The blindfold was removed. She was in a camp. Dozens of eyes watched her from low fires and shadows of tents. Women, children, warriors. No chains. No cell. Just a post in the center of the camp with leather cords binding her wrists. A man stepped forward, slower than the others. Not younger, but not old. His presence drew attention like heat in a cold room. His face was calm, unreadable, but his eyes studied her like he recognized something she didn't. He didn't speak to her. Just stared. Then he turned away. Emily sat in dirt. Waited. Hours passed. No one came close, but food was placed near her, beans, dried meat, water. At dusk, the man with the eyes returned. He crouched, not touching the bull, not speaking. Just watching. "Are you going to kill me?" she asked, not loud. Her voice cracked from dryness. He didn't answer. A flicker passed through his face, some ghost of a thought, but he stood and walked away. That night, the stars above looked unfamiliar, even though she'd seen them all her life. They didn't twinkle like they did from her porch. They stared down cold. She slept little. When she woke, he was sitting nearby again. "You were there," she said. He didn't move. "In the canyon. 2 years ago. My brother, he let an Apache boy go. You looked younger. Less scars." His eyes shifted. That was all. She let silence stretch before trying again. "He told me about it. Said the boy was scared out of his skin, half dead, but didn't cry. Just watched him, even while bleeding." He stood slowly. Still no words. That day the camp gathered. Drums. Low voices. She wasn't sure what they were saying, but she caught one phrase repeated. "Wakina. Be offering." The man, her watcher, stood apart, arms folded, unmoved. Another warrior, younger and sharper-faced, addressed the crowd. His words sliced the air. They cheered. Her watcher said nothing. That night, a whisper of conversation drifted close enough to reach her ears. The sharp-faced man, Bone Knife, they called him, was arguing with someone. She is the payment. Blood for blood. Or has the sun baked the honor from your spine? I owe a debt, came the reply. The voice was steady, low, familiar. A debt to her? No. To her brother. He saved my life. Bone Knife laughed, bitter and scornful. That makes her your burden, not your protection. Emily's breath caught. Her heart quickened. The next morning, when the man, Hada, they called him, brought her water, she met his eyes directly. You remember? She said. He didn't nod. Didn't deny. You owe my brother, she said. But I'm not him. I know, Hada said. His voice was low, rough like worn leather. First time she'd heard it. And in it she heard something that chilled her more than hatred, remorse. He rose and walked away again. But something had changed in his stride. Not just watchfulness now. Purpose. She looked down at the bowl of water he left. And realized it wasn't full. It had sloshed over the rim. Because his hands had been shaking. The night didn't feel wild, it felt organized. A calm fire burned at the center of the Apache camp, casting long, disciplined shadows. The people moved with purpose, but no rush. Eyes flicked toward Emily as she sat near the tied post, but none lingered. They'd seen prisoners before. They knew what this was supposed to be. Emily watched in silence, arms bound, dust in her teeth. A group of young girls passed her, carrying bundles of wood. One, no older than 10, met her gaze briefly, then looked away. She turned her attention to the man they called Hada. He sat away from the others, sharpening a blade, though he didn't need to. His hands moved like habit, not necessity. Across the fire, Bone Knife watched him with the same slow contempt a wolf might show a dog that forgot it wasn't wild anymore. Hada didn't meet his gaze. Kona, the oldest among them, approached the fire next. His bones were thin, his voice quiet, but when he spoke, the others listened. He didn't speak English, not to her, at least, but Emily caught enough. Names. Dates. A tone that cracked with age and loss. Then Kona said something that stopped the others from chewing, drinking, or murmuring. He raised his hand to the stars, then pointed directly at her. Bone Knife stood. She dies when the sun next touches the stone, he said in English, voice flat. So the spirits will stop walking in our sleep. Emily didn't flinch. She stared straight ahead, past Bone Knife, to the embers at the edge of the fire. Hada said nothing. But his fingers paused on the blade. Later, he walked near the river alone. Emily watched from where they kept her now, loosely tied, more for show than need. She waited. When he returned, she was standing. Why wait? She asked. He didn't answer. They're scared. That's what this is. They're scared, and I'm the nearest white face. He looked at her, this time not with suspicion or guilt, but with something colder. They buried 6 old men last week. Your soldiers gave them water, and when they drank, they died choking on blood. You're not the nearest face. You're the only one they could find. She swallowed, hard. I'm a schoolteacher. You speak their language, he said. Not a question. Enough to hear the hate. He tilted his head. You hear pain. It sounds like hate when you're on the other side. Emily didn't reply. She sat again, slowly. That night, Bone Knife addressed the younger warriors with fire in his voice. Emily couldn't follow the words, but she saw it in their postures, the way heads nodded, backs straightened, fingers tapped at blades. They were preparing themselves, not for a battle, but a justification. Hada stayed in the shadows. When the fire died down and the camp grew still, he finally approached her again. He knelt, hands on his knees, looking at the dust beside her, not her face. My name is Hada. She waited. I was 15 when your brother spared me. I remember. He told me. Said you stared at him like a man already dead. I was. Why did he let you go? He said I was just a boy. That I didn't choose the war. Then he said, don't make me regret this. Emily looked down at the leather ties on her wrists. Do you regret this? I regret many things, he said, then rose and left her with the sound of crackling ash. By dawn, she saw men preparing a stone altar outside the camp's edge. Not an executioner's slab, something older, ceremonial. The weight of it settled on her shoulders, though no one had touched her since she arrived. Children had stopped looking at her. Only Hada looked now, and only when he thought she wasn't watching. Bone Knife passed near her that afternoon. He carried a pouch and a painted stick. He knelt and pressed the stick into the dirt, drawing a shape, a circle split by a line. You die with the sun, he said in English, not for her, but for those listening. Will you feel better after? She asked him. He smiled slightly. No. But the dead might. Hada's voice came from behind. They won't. Bone Knife didn't turn. Speak too often in a woman's defense and people forget you are a warrior. I remember what a warrior is, Hada said. A killer who remembers who he was before he killed. Bone Knife stood, turned slowly. Then remember this too, she is not your burden. Whatever he did for you, her blood won't repay it. Hada didn't answer. Their silence spoke more than words. That night, Kona prayed alone beside the altar. Emily watched as he laid tobacco on the stone and whispered. Hada sat by the edge of the fire, his blade untouched for the first time. She approached him, uninvited. They didn't stop her. Maybe they wanted her to understand what was coming. Are you going to let them kill me? I don't know yet, he said. What would your debt mean if you do? He looked up at her. Sometimes a debt isn't payment. Sometimes it's a weight. A reminder. She sat beside him, ignoring the stares it drew. My brother saved you because he believed there was something better in you. Do you believe that now? His jaw tightened. I believe he made a mistake. Then prove him right. He looked toward the edge of the camp where the altar waited under moonlight. There's no proving left. Only choosing. When she stood to return to her place, she said, Then choose. Hada remained by the fire long after everyone else had gone. When he finally moved, it was slow, deliberate. He walked into the woods. Not running, not hiding. Searching. And by morning, he had made his decision. The fire in the center of the camp burned low, but tension around it smoldered hot. No laughter. No idle talk. Just the scrape of knives being sharpened, wood being broken, hands moving with a silent readiness. When Kona stood, all movement slowed. Emily sat cross-legged near the same post, no longer bound. It wasn't mercy, they simply knew she had nowhere to run. Kona raised one hand, palm open to the sky. His voice, though aged, carried. He spoke in Apache, each syllable deliberate. Emily caught none of it, but she didn't need a translation. She felt it. The reverence. The grief. A younger warrior moved to the center, dark paint smeared across his face in wide, confident lines. Bone Knife. His steps were wide, aggressive, meant to take space and hold it. His eyes scanned the circle of faces and then landed on her. No smirk, no satisfaction. Just calculation. She is the offering, he said in English, addressing the elders and younger warriors alike. The spirits demand balance. The land demands a debt paid. Our elders died choking on poisoned water. No more waiting. No more peace that leads to slaughter. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Kona remained still, head slightly bowed, but his silence was a kind of approval. Tradition gave weight to vengeance. Hata stood slowly, not forcing attention, but drawing it anyway. He didn't speak at first. When he did, it was in Apache, slow and direct. Emily couldn't understand him, but the way the others shifted told her he wasn't agreeing. Bone Knife's nostrils flared. He responded sharply in the same tongue, stepping toward Hada. Words clashed like bone on stone. Not shouts, declarations. The younger warriors leaned forward, listening hard. Finally, Bone Knife switched back to English. You forget who the enemy is. Hada's face remained unreadable. I remember too well. Bone Knife gestured toward Emily. You would protect her? For what? A promise made in another tongue? A white man's words? I was dying. He spared me. Gave me water. Left his rifle by my side. Hoda's voice never rose. He didn't know my name. Didn't ask. Just said, don't make me regret this. Bone Knife turned in a slow circle, addressing the others now. We bleed, they plant flags. We bury our dead, they build fences. This is no place for guilt. The land does not care for debts, only for blood. Hoda walked forward until only a few paces separated them. Then we are no better than them. The silence that followed was thick enough to choke on. Kona finally raised both hands. He spoke one word. Tomorrow. The fire was extinguished. The circle broke apart. Emily remained seated. Hoda passed her without stopping. She spoke anyway. You tried. He paused. It's not done. Bone Knife's tent glowed faintly from a fire within. Inside, he stood over a map drawn into hide, markings scrawled in charcoal and blood. He turned to his younger cousin, a boy barely of age. He will get in the way, Bone Knife said. I want you to watch him. Every movement. If he so much as looks at the river, you tell me. The boy nodded, face pale. Understand this. Hoda was once the kind of man who would gut a scout without waking the others. He's softened. That makes him dangerous. That night, Hoda sat by the edge of the camp, near a rock worn smooth by years of wind. He opened his pouch and pulled out the cloth his mother had woven. Blue and red patterns, faded now, but intact. He'd carried it since childhood. It reminded him of home. Not a place. A feeling. Emily approached slowly, stopping a few feet away. She held the bowl he'd given her earlier. Empty now. They've decided, haven't they? He nodded. She crouched beside him. What if I told you I'm not worth the risk? I'd say that's not my choice to make. Would my brother have tried to stop this? Hoda turned the cloth in his hands. He didn't hesitate to save a dying boy. In enemy land. Alone. Then maybe he was a fool. Maybe. But a fool who gave me more time than I earned. She watched him quietly. What are you going to do? He tucked the cloth away. What I have to. Across the camp, Bone Knife watched the exchange from the shadows. His grip tightened on the knife in his hand. Before sunrise, a council of elders met again. This time, in private. Kona spoke first, laying tobacco at the center. Hoda stood outside the circle, waiting. Not pleading. Waiting to be called. He was. They asked him one question, and he answered with 3 words. Silence followed. Bone Knife barged into the circle, his voice sharp. He accused Hoda of betrayal, of turning soft, of forgetting the blood shed by his father and brothers. He demanded action. Demanded exile. Kona said nothing for a long while. Then he placed one hand on Hoda's shoulder and spoke the old phrase. Let the ordeal judge the man. The others nodded. Bone Knife's eyes flared. He won't survive it. Kona didn't look at him. Then the spirits will answer for us. The decision was made. When Hoda left the tent, he didn't speak to Emily. He simply nodded once. She didn't understand what it meant. Not yet. The night air was sharp with cold, but Emily's hands didn't shake. She sat waiting, heart loud in her chest but breath steady. The camp was quiet. Fires dimmed. No footsteps. No whispers. Just the long hum of desert wind pushing against canvas and bone. Then he came, without warning, without word. Hoda's shadow moved beside her. In his hand, a small leather satchel and a blade. He dropped the satchel by her feet and sliced the cords at her wrists in one motion, quick and clean. She didn't speak. He gestured, just once, and started walking. She followed. Past the sleeping dogs, the buried coals, the woven tents. No one stirred. Or if they did, they looked the other way. They slipped between stones and sage, boots silent against the sand. The moon was thin, just enough to see outlines, not faces. Hoda didn't look back. Emily stayed close, half a pace behind, eyes fixed on his shoulders. They walked for nearly an hour before he broke the silence. "Don't speak unless I stop. If we hear anything, drop flat." She nodded. The trail narrowed. Thornbrush clawed at her sleeves. A lizard scattered beneath a rock, and she bit back a startled breath. "Water's ahead," he said finally. "The river cuts the trail. We cross once, then circle back to lose tracks." She didn't question him. Didn't ask how far. Her legs ached, her throat raw. She kept walking. Behind them, in the camp, Bone Knife stepped into the empty space where Emily had been. He saw the cut cords, the missing satchel, the absence of guard. His face didn't show anger. Just confirmation. He turned and headed straight for the horses. At the river, Hada stopped. Bent to fill the satchel with water, then handed it to her. "Drink slow. Save the rest." She did. It tasted of mud and minerals, but it was wet, and it filled the hollow ache in her gut. "Why now?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper. "I waited for the sky to turn." He looked up. The stars had shifted. Enough time to buy a few more miles. When they crossed the river, he made her walk upstream in the water for nearly 20 minutes. The cold bit deep, but she didn't complain. He studied the ground often, looking back at their tracks, scanning for breaks in the silence. When they reached higher ground, she finally asked, "Will they come after us?" "Yes." "How many?" "3. Maybe more if Bone Knife wants to finish it fast." She stopped walking. "So we don't outrun them?" "No." He adjusted the strap of his rifle, eyes scanning the ridgeline. "Then why are we still going?" He didn't answer immediately. "Because he gave me water," he said finally. "And you carry his name." They moved again. By morning, the sun was behind clouds. Not full heat yet, but enough to steal breath. Hada led her to a narrow canyon, half collapsed by time, hidden by brush. It gave shade. Shelter. But also only one exit. They didn't talk while resting. Emily chewed on dry meat, drank small sips of water, eyes constantly moving. She didn't ask for comfort. Hada didn't offer any. The sound of hooves came just after noon. Hada crouched, motioned for silence, then slipped through the stones without a sound. Emily flattened herself to the rock, heart thudding in her chest. 2 riders passed. One stopped. Hada pressed his body deeper into the canyon wall, hand gripping his knife. The rider turned. Looked toward the canyon mouth. Waited. Then moved on. They didn't breathe for a full minute. Emily whispered, "You knew they'd go that way." "I hoped." By sunset, their trail bent toward a wide flat. Civilization was close. A trade station. Telegraph wires stretched across the horizon like veins. "We'll reach it by dusk," he said. She looked ahead, then back at him. "You're not coming." "No." "They'll kill you." He said nothing. "You should come." "No," he said again, quieter. She stopped walking. "I'll tell them." "About the debt." "What you did." "They won't care." "I will." He looked at her then, and something behind his eyes softened. Not regret. Something older. Something he hadn't let live in a long time. "I was supposed to die," he said. "That day your brother spared me. Everything after has been a borrowed life." She opened her mouth to speak, then closed it. Hada placed the satchel in her hands, now lighter than it had been. "You know how to follow the wire. Keep the sun on your left. Don't stop." She reached out as if to touch his arm, but stopped herself. Then she turned. And walked. He waited until she was no more than a line in the distance. Then he turned the other way. And walked back toward the place where the sun would not be merciful. The camp was quiet when he returned, but the quiet was wrong. Not the silence of sleep or respect, it was the weight of waiting. Eyes tracked him as he walked, faces carved from suspicion and scorn. No one spoke. No one raised a hand. They didn't need to. Bone Knife stood in the center, arms folded across his chest, flanked by 2 young warriors. He didn't shout. He didn't ask. You think coming back buys you honor? Hada didn't stop walking. I didn't come to bargain. Bone Knife stepped forward. She's gone. You let her go. That's done. She's free. That's done. You could have kept walking. Vanished. But you came back. I came for the ordeal. The words dropped like a stone into still water. Around them, some turned away. Others leaned in, watching closely. Bone Knife laughed once. You want a trial? You want mercy wrapped in old words? No mercy, Hata said. Just judgment. Kona stepped out of the shadows then, thin as wind, but somehow heavier than all of them. He looked at Hata for a long time, then turned to Bone Knife. Prepare the ash. It took less than an hour. They brought him to the stone post outside the camp's edge, where the sky stretched wide and sun touched every inch of earth. The pole was old, sacred, used only for the ordeal. A rope across the chest, arms bare, legs bound just enough to keep a man standing but not steady. They smeared ash and rings around him. No food. No water. No movement. If he fell, he failed. The first day passed without a word. The sun climbed and beat down. He didn't flinch. Children came to look, but were pulled away. Bone Knife watched from a distance, not speaking. Not mocking. Just watching. By nightfall, his lips had cracked. His back burned. Still he stood. On the second day, the wind kicked up. Dust stung his eyes. A crow landed near him, then took off again. He didn't blink. A young man, one of Bone Knife's, approached with a jug of water, held just out of reach. Say the word, he whispered. And I tell them you begged. Hada didn't answer. By the third morning, his knees shook. Blood crusted where the ropes had rubbed skin raw. His breath came in shallow pulls, and he saw things, flashes of memory, some not his own. A woman's voice he hadn't heard in 20 years. A stream that no longer existed. Thomas Thatcher's eyes in the moonlight, watching him crawl away. Midday, Bone Knife approached, stepping into the ash ring. A violation. You've proven your point, he said. They're whispering your name again like it means something. Hada didn't respond. Bone Knife crouched. But you know what happens when this ends, don't you? You're no longer one of us. Even if you live, you'll be nothing. Hada looked at him, slow and deliberate. Then I'm free. Bone Knife stood and left without a word. By evening, Kona returned. He carried no staff, no smoke. Just a blade. He stood at the edge of the ash and waited. Hada's legs gave out just as the sun touched the edge of the canyon. His body folded, but he caught himself. One knee down. Not both. Kona stepped closer. You remain. I do. You are changed. I am. You are no longer Apache. I never was. Kona nodded once. He cut the ropes. Hada didn't fall. He rose, slow, trembling, but upright. You live, the old man said. But not here. Hada didn't speak. He turned away from the camp and began walking. Not a single voice called after him. Not even Bone Knife. They watched him go until the dust swallowed his figure. That night, the camp slept a little quieter, but none dared say why. The bell rang soft across the open plain, barely loud enough to stir the morning air. A child's hand reached up to push open the crooked wooden door, and one by one they filed into the little schoolhouse. Dust trailed behind their boots. Most were too young to understand the silence behind the teacher's eyes. Emily Thatcher stood at the front of the room, writing the date on the blackboard. Her hand moved slowly, deliberately. April 9th, 1872. Below the date, she wrote one word: oath. No one asked what it meant. They took their seats. She turned, eyes settling on them the way a storm watches the land it's already passed over. Today, she said quietly, we're going to talk about what it means to owe something to someone. Not money. Not favors. Something deeper. She looked down at her hands. The scar on her wrist had faded to a pale thread. Her voice didn't tremble. There are people who carry debts they never speak of. Not because they can't repay them, but because the act of carrying them is the repayment. A boy raised his hand. Like when Pa gives our neighbor water after a dry season. She nodded. That's part of it. Another child piped up. Did someone save your life, Miss Thatcher? She looked out the window, to the land beyond the fence. Wind bent the grass. The horizon sat still and wide, as if holding its breath. Yes, she said. Someone did. They waited for the story, but none came. After class, she stayed behind, cleaning the board, sweeping the floor. The sun was low, shadows long. When she stepped outside, the sky had begun to burn orange. She walked the fence line, boots cutting through dry grass, past the chapel, past the grave markers. She stopped by one stone. No name. Just a flat rock with a red thread tied around it. She crouched, brushing a bit of dirt away. The thread was hers. From the satchel he gave her. She spoke softly. They think you vanished. That you faded into the hills like a ghost. She smiled, faint. I tell them what really happened. When I can. In the town saloon, the talk still came and went. Rumors wore different hats. One man said the Apache cut her loose as a peace offering. Another claimed she escaped alone, killed 3 warriors herself, barefoot in the desert. The barkeep nodded at each version with the same glass in his hand. Maybe it was just luck, someone muttered. Another leaned forward. I heard she was saved by one of them. A half-blood with a blade sharper than his conscience. Half-bloods don't come back to talk about it, the first man said. No, the second replied. But she did. Outside, beyond the edge of town, the land didn't care about stories. Wind moved the same. Coyotes still sang at dusk. And somewhere out there, where no wires reached and no boots wandered, a man walked without a name. He had no tribe now. No camp. He hadn't spoken in weeks. But each morning, he placed a stone at the edge of a ridge and whispered the same word before turning away. Paid. Then silence. And dust.